you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, we get up, all of us get up here every day of Parliament and we talk about bills that we're very passionate about. We talk about bills that we have strong opinions on. But, Deputy Speaker, I say this quite sincerely. This is the most dangerous, scary bill that I personally have ever got up to speak about. I am really, really scared and really— oh, someone laughs. So, yeah, can't have a difference of opinion. No. That says it straight away, Deputy Speaker. Can't have a difference of opinion. I'm going to read out Voltaire. Voltaire, a French philosopher, Speaker. I disagree with everything you have said, but I will defend every day your right to say it. You might want to dwell on that over the other side there, or the members over the other side, Deputy Speaker, might want to dwell on that, because that's what this bill is undermining. I disagree with everything you say, but I will defend your right to say it. And what this Labor radical left-wing government is doing, Deputy Speaker, is abandoning that principle. They will now no longer— this government does not want to defend our right to say things that they disagree with. And that's what this is about, Deputy Speaker. So why would you want to do that? I'm surprised in Australia that we are debating this issue at this level. And you might want to say, well, what is the motivation? What is the motivation of a government to do this? And this radical left-wing government, Deputy Speaker, what their motivation is on this bill is control. Because when you want to stamp it or you want to clamp down on free speech in this country, you are about control. They do not want everyone necessarily to be able to say what that person believes is the truth. Because at the end of the day, Deputy Speaker, one person's misinformation is another person's opinion. And that is something that literally our diggers— we always have great ceremonial things about our diggers and our veterans, as we should, and is respected by both sides of this chamber. But our diggers fought for stuff like this. The basis of free speech in this country has always been something that's been respected. And again, Deputy Speaker, I can't believe we are debating this right in this chamber today. This is a very, very slippery slope. Now, the other side, they'll get up and say, oh, ACMA, it's independent, it's a government body, it's just looking for misinformation. Well, how are you going to define it? How is someone going to define what is misinformation? We've all read— I assume a lot of people have read 1984 by George Orwell, Deputy Speaker. This is all about the Ministry of Truth. Some anonymous person, if this bill goes through, is going to have the right to say and decide what is information for individuals to be able to say on platforms that they want to say it. And this is a slippery slope. Again, I think it's about control. I think it's also a part of it. I think one of the reasons that this government's so motivated about this too at the moment is the voice referendum. The voice referendum, the government of the day, this government today, criticised people through the voice referendum that misinformation was being spread. Well, what was the misinformation that was being spread? Because people disagreed with them. Because people had legitimate concerns. Some people's opinion was that was going to divide us by race. That was people's opinion. They say that's misinformation. Some people had huge constitutional questions about the voice referendum, that it was going to have huge constitutional ramifications. Now, are we now not allowed to say that? The government of the day, the Prime Minister of the day, has said— many members of that side have said that their misinformation was spread about that. So is that what the person in ACMA is going to decide? That if you have a difference of opinion on things, you can't say that? So is the person in ACMA going to decide that if we'd had the voice referendum and they had these powers, that they would take down commentary on the voice referendum that said this is going to divide our country by race? Is that what the ACMA person is going to decide? That's what the government thinks it was. The government thinks it was misinformation. Is ACMA going to say that if you had constitutional concerns about it, and people say, well, you shouldn't have constitutional concerns about it because of whatever their opinion was. So what is the ACMA person going to say? Well, I agree that that's misinformation because of their opinion on it, and clamp down on free speech in this country. So I take the member before me who spoke and used the example of vaccines. Now, personally, Speaker, I supported the vaccine rollout in Australia through COVID, Deputy Speaker. But I don't want people who didn't agree with that to be quietened. They should not be, because they disagree with what was, the conventional thing from the medical profession. If a person did have that opinion, they in this country should have the right to say it. Now, the member opposite actually used it as an example that they shouldn't have been able to say it. So again, Voltaire, I disagree with everything you say, but I will defend every day your right to say it. And that is under threat. And that is under threat in Australia. Now, why do I say, Deputy Speaker, that this is a radical left-wing government that we have in Australia right now? Because there is no other Western country that has given an independent or given a government entity this much power. The UK don't have these type of laws. The US don't have these type of laws. No other Western country has this. So again, that's why this is a very, very dangerous left-wing government, radical, extreme left-wing government we have here. You know what actually you can't do either, Deputy Speaker? I could say something in this chamber. I am protected by parliamentary privilege, thankfully. If I say something in the parliament and it's recorded as it is, an individual may not be able to post that on a platform because the ACMA may decide that what I've said is misinformation. So ACMA could actually take down off a platform if an individual reposts what I've said, something that I have said in this chamber. And that hasn't been negated by the minister with this bill because she's been asked that question in a briefing. So that's how scary this is, Deputy Speaker. That's how scary this is. You can say whatever you like as long as you agree with the radical left-wing government. That's what this rule is about. Now, let's go through it again. I'm not going to call it ACMA anymore. If this bill passes, ACMA no longer exists. It will be called the Ministry for Truth, also known from George Orwell's novel in 1984, Deputy Speaker, because that is the powers they have. Now, you might say, well, OK, how's it going to work in practice? What will ACMA have the power to do? Podcasts. You have a podcast. And you have a podcast that you think someone is misinformation. ACMA. And also the dangerous thing about this, the platform owners will always lean on the side of taking the information down rather than leave it there, because the penalties that ACMA will charge them and fine them are severe penalties. So if you're a platform and you go, well, I don't want ACMA to come along and say you've left this up by this individual on this podcast or this interview that they did with someone, we're not going to let that stay. They're going to lean to take it down because of the severity of the fines that ACMA will put on that platform. So, this is very dangerous stuff, Deputy Speaker. So it takes in podcasts, it takes in message boards, aggregate news. There's no other word to describe it except for censorship. And again, should this surprise me? Maybe not. Maybe not, because any radical government, any extreme government wants control. We see any, if you look at history, you look at any, right-wing government or left-wing government that's extreme, they always want to control the press. They always want to control the information that is out there. And again, I'll do it a couple of times through this speech, Deputy Speaker. A great known philosopher with a great, with a great saying, I disagree with everything you say, but I will protect the right every day for you to say that. But that's not the essence of this bill. That is not how the minister thinks about this, who's got this minister. And obviously, I'm assuming that the whole of the Labor Party will vote for this bill. When you talk about free speech, not a lot of free speech within the Labor caucus, because if you do have a difference of opinion publicly with the Labor Party and you're in caucus, you get kicked out of the party. But that says something about their ideas about freedoms, free speech as well. And I'm assuming the Greens will say that as well. Really? Free speech, doesn't come easily for them in some ways. So, Deputy Speaker, just want to talk about some people's. You might say, well, you would say this because you're, a partisan politician on the other side of the chamber, Deputy Speaker, but I want to give you some quotes from some third parties. The Victorian Bar Association, here we go, the New South Wales Solicitor General. This This is what he says about this bill: a patronising assumption that members of the community cannot make a judgment about those opinions but must be protected from the obviously inadequacy of their judgment. So that's a good point. They're basically saying, we can't trust you to see through things that are mistruths. We don't trust you as individuals to be able to see what is truth and what is not as truth, so we'll protect you from it. You know, that's just justifying, again, shutting down free speech. The Victorian Bar Association: the bill's interference with the self-fulfilment of free expression will occur primarily by chilling self-censorship. It will inevitably bring about the individual users of the relevant services. So, again, free will is gone under this, Deputy Speaker. Victorian barrister Peter A. Clark: there have been some minor adjustments to this bill. He said it's like lipstick on a pig. He said that to capture political content was a change for the worse. Politics involves a lot of commentary and a lot of loose language. It doesn't necessarily mean it's disinformation or misinformation. The Queensland Council for Civil Liberties: this bill is unsatisfactory. If the government said there are deficiencies, because again, the other thing about here, Speaker, that we have laws already. We have laws already having prohibitions on some things you can and can't say. You can't defame people, Deputy Speaker. If you go out and say something about someone that is untrue, there are defamation laws already that protect people about that. You can't go out and say X about someone and just get away with that. They can take you through a defamation process. There are laws. So let's go on. The Queensland Council for Civil Liberties: this bill is unsatisfactory. Professor Nick Cotsworth, the former Deputy Chief Health Officer: the terms misinformation and disinformation have become overused in the public discourse. The Australian Christian Lobby: there's no excuse for what's proposed in this bill. Where the government should be safeguarding the free speech of Australians, it will instead require social media to control our public discourse. So again, I make the point, Deputy Speaker, that there are protections already in our legal system. You can't incite violence. There are laws about that. You can't go out and incite violence in our country. There are existing laws to protect and to clamp down on that. You can't go out and defame people because there are laws about defaming people. But this law is about clamping down on free speech in Australia. It's the most radical legislation on this issue around the Western world. I understand that Labor were disappointed they lost the Voice referendum. I understand that they don't like the fact that people disagree with them. I understand the fact that the Prime Minister doesn't like memes of him that look silly. But this is a democracy. Our diggers fought for free speech. We in this country, and it's been said on both sides of this parliament, I've heard politicians on both sides of this parliament say this, quote, that I disagree with everything you say but will defend your right to say it. That has now been abandoned by this radical left-wing government. And when this bill will obviously pass this chamber in the next 24 hours because Labor have no choice. Labor have to lock in and they can't have a difference of opinion in this chamber and cross the floor. But shame on this government. You have started us down a very slippery slope where some faceless bureaucrat that we will now call the Ministry for Truth will decide what individuals can or can't say on social media platforms. And I think, this is, I think, when this legislation goes through, I think it's probably the saddest day and the saddest piece of legislation I've seen for the freedoms and liberties of our country. And everyone who votes for this should be absolutely ashamed for what you are doing. Yeah.